Hi, this is Rochelle Markov, eXp Realty, and this is a video about the transactional process for buyers. But for you sellers, it's also good to know as well, because then it can help you understand what buyers have to do before they come to your property. And then also sellers, you will also be part of the transactional process once that property is under contract with you. So before we get into the video, please like, subscribe, hit that bell notification for more videos. So I had already talked to great length in another video about step number 1, which is the pre-approval, if this is going to be a finance transaction, or if this is an all-cash transaction, that I will need to see a proof of funds. So I won't go too deep into that. Please just check out that video. So step 2, we got your pre-approval, we got your proof of funds. Let's go shopping. So something to keep in mind is that we have different markets. There's different types of homes that go really fast, things like that. What is your location that you are desiring? And also the important thing is to keep an open mind, because maybe you didn't want a townhouse, but then once you toured the townhouse and discovered that it could be an affordable option, then discovered, wow, maybe I don't want to be shoveling snow, or maybe I don't have time to do lawn care. I'll just pay somebody else to do it. That could also be an option. Maybe it's, you thought, gosh, we'd like to have a little bit of a fixer-upper, but then after looking through those properties, thinking, oh my goodness, this is so much to do. Maybe you just want something that's move-in ready. It's up to you. Just keep an open mind, but also don't try to force something that you know just won't be for you. So also know that properties may go fast. They may stay on the market a long time. So just always be prepared for anything and to make a decision. You're at a property, it is as close to perfect as perfect can get. Let's put in an offer. So one of the things that I tell buyers is, even though you have this pre-approval letter that is beautifully written by your lender, and it states that buyer is pre-approved for a certain amount of money, I'm not going to encourage that buyer to submit that exact pre-approval letter. And let me tell you why. So let's say you have a pre-approval for $300,000. And now you're looking at a property that the price tag on it is $249,900. So that's the offer that you want to make, is the $249,900. Well, now, if you put in your pre-approval letter saying you're pre-approved for $300,000, the seller could come back with a counter offer and say, hey, you're pre-approved for more. We want more. So what I tell buyers is that go to the lender, or I could talk to the lender too. We're going to say buyer is pre-approved for $249,900 for this particular property that is where the offer is being made. And then I also like to have the contingencies of, does this buyer also need to sell a property before purchasing this property, or is there an inspection that is required by the lender? Is there anything else that the lender must see in order for that property to close? And so then when it's presented to the seller cannot come back and say, okay, buyer, we know you're pre-approved for more. The seller can say, okay, you have offered listing price, which is what we have determined this value of this property. We see everything else here. So now it's up to the seller to either accept or deny that offer, or to counteroffer. So counteroffers, negotiating terms. So what does that mean? So let's say a buyer submits an offer that says, this is the price and here are the contingencies. Perhaps there is a contingency of an inspection. Perhaps part of the negotiation is the seller will pay the closing costs. Maybe the buyer will pay the closing costs. Whatever it may be, I've had it where an offer was submitted and the inspection contingency was for 10 days. The seller said, we want the contingency of that inspection to be 5 days. No big deal. It was, all signed, everything went great. Sometimes it could be a contingency that the buyer or seller is not willing to negotiate with, and then they may withdraw the offer. So it's just something to talk to your agent about, and to know that every situation is unique. And there could be a whole host of things that happen. It could be very easy. So always be in communication with everybody who is part of the transaction at that moment. Now that an offer has been accepted, then the lender is going to do their part with the loan application. Let's say that an appraisal was part of the contingency, so that will be ordered up. Let's say an inspection was elected to happen, or maybe it was required by the lender, then that will need to be scheduled. Let's say that they agreed to replace a broken window before closing, then that will happen. So again, always be talking with your agent, be talking with your lender, whoever is conducting the closing, to ensure that everything is happening on schedule, so that way it can be closed by that set date that was part of the purchase agreement. So let's talk more about the appraisal, and let's talk more about the inspection. So the appraisal is pretty much always required when there is a finance transaction. Basically, the appraisal is needed because whoever is financing the transaction, it needs to know if your property that's being purchased for $249,900 is actually going to be able to be replaced for that amount, or less, or more, however you may look at it. So they just need to know that, because they are taking on that risk of financing this for you that is going to be paid back in small increments over a set number of payments. So for example, let's say the property is under contract for $249,900, and then the appraiser comes in, they do all of their due diligence beforehand, they take all of their assessments during the appraisal, and let's say that they say, we assess this to be $229,900. So now the lender is going to say, okay, there is a price difference between what the contract price is, for the purchase price, I should say, and the appraisal. So that will be something that will need to be reviewed, and how is the buyer going to then proceed with that part of the transaction. Sometimes the appraisal comes in right where the purchase price is, so then there shouldn't be any discrepancies, and sometimes the appraisal comes in higher. So anyway, whatever may be prepared, because of whatever the appraisal price is, and whatever the purchase price is will determine what the loan amount will be. So talk more with your lender about that. So now it's getting really exciting, because this is the final walkthrough. So now it's kind of weird, because you've only been to the house maybe a handful of times. Maybe this is a property that you've been to many times and this is a for sale by owner and you have personally negotiated everything with the homeowner. But sometimes when it's a property that is being represented by a brokerage, then the person who is buying may not have ever been in that home until they went for the first showing. And then they may have been there for the inspection. They may have been there for the appraisal. They may have been there when part of the contingencies were worked out. But now is the final walkthrough. So sometimes in the initial showing, the property could be staged, which I have talked about in a whole separate video. So please check that one out. So when a property is staged, that means that the furniture, artwork, things like that have been arranged to give it, a certain feel of what the homeowner or realtor or stager thinks would capture the attention the best for whoever may be there to view the property. Sometimes the property is completely vacant. So when you go to the final walkthrough, what should be happening is that the homeowner has already, aka the seller, they have already moved out all of their belongings. So now that is time for the buyer, the new homeowner, to go through, and that's when they check to see if everything is in the same condition or things have been replaced that were once talked about. And if there's anything that's part of the final walkthrough that was not part of what they thought the property was going to be, as far as selling and the condition, or if there's something that should have been there that isn't, or that it is there that shouldn't, type of a thing, always talk to your real estate agent and they will get things worked out with you. Now, there comes the closing. So the closing is when all of those documents are signed, and this is when the property can be conveyed from the previous homeowner to the new homeowner, who is the buyer. So one of the things that the closing company will require is like a cashier's check for payment. Sometimes they will also accept wire transfer funds. It just depends. But most of the time, those funds need to be taken out of the account for a cashier's check, or e-transferred. Get that all set up well in advance to ensure everything will be moved from one account to another without any discrepancies. Because if there is any discrepancies, that will delay the conveyance of the property, which then turns into a whole different set of issues. And the only thing that we want to see is that everybody is happy in the end. It's the most important thing to me as an agent. So we just wanted to make sure that everybody's on the same page, that you have all of your documents, you have everything completed, and that all of the funds are properly distributed. And as far as the amount of closing costs, so again, let's go back to that property of $249,900. So let's say the mortgage company is financing 80%. So then it's up to the buyer to bring in the other 20%. But then also think about, there was also an earnest money that was presented at the time of the offer. And then the closing company will be coming up with what is the prorated taxes, how much is it to close the transaction, what are these other fees, the recording fees, title insurance fees, things like that. So just ensure that you have talked about it with your agent, with your lender, with the closing company to make sure everybody is on the same page with the exact down to the penny amount that is needed for closing. And like I said, some of these steps were only for buyers. Some of them are also for the sellers to pay attention to because this is how they will be involved with the buyers. So for example, the buyers will be there to get their pre-approval or to ensure that they have a proof of funds for the all-cash transaction. And then when the sellers come into play is when the property is under contract, and the sellers also should be aware of what the appraisal price was and if there was any inspection issues, because then if there was an inspection part of it that came up, let's say that there was something found where shingles were not tacked down properly, that could be a common issue that needs to be clarified, and that's also an issue that may need to be resolved before the transaction can be closed. So now you have to think about, or is this something that the buyers will say, it's fine, just we'll close, and then we ourselves will find somebody to help us with that. It's all about that you clearly communicate so that way when you get to closing that there's no surprises. So if there are any questions, please contact me. I am licensed in Minnesota. If you are a buyer who is from out of state, out of country, who's looking to buy in Southeast Minnesota or the Rochester, Minnesota area where I work in this market, please let me know. I'd be very happy to assist you. And if there is anything that I'm not able to help with, no worries. I have many lenders I work with. I have wonderful title people I work with. I have a real estate mentor. Any questions will be able to be answered. So please contact me. My information is below, and you have a great day.